And now to our first conversation. We examine Nigeria's pharmaceutical landscape at a critical moment for the economy, with insecurity disrupting supply chains. The naira, still cheap compared to the dollar, and healthcare needs rising. The push for local drug manufacturing has never been more urgent. Neimeth's latest earnings report shows strong momentum, but the big question remains: can Nigeria build a resilient pharma industry that delivers essential medicines, reduces import dependence, and serves, rural communities? We break down the economics, the policy gaps, and the opportunities shaping the future of drug production in Nigeria. Joining me now for this conversation, we have Mr. Valentine Okelu, MD CEO, is Neimeth International PLC, listed on Nigeria's stock market with a market capitalization of about 23 billion naira. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, sir.
Thank you very much, Ladi, for having me. Yeah.
Fantastic. And, fun fact, there's a lot of traffic coming to the studio, and Mr. Okelu had to make a huge sacrifice to get here, to beat the traffic on Kara Bridge. Thank you so much, for making it today, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, so, definitely we've been talking a lot about, there's a push now, for local manufacturing of, drugs. Ever since the naira, weakened a lot, we've had that pressure because we import a lot of, this essential medicines, at this point. Talk to me about what you're seeing, when it comes to the prospects for Nigeria, being that pharmaceutical production hub. I'm seeing in South Africa, news coming out from there. They've been able to produce their a homegrown, what's it called? The one that's used to, fight away viruses.
Okay. HIV?
Yes, a vaccine.
Viral,
a vaccine, yes,
vaccines,
in South Africa. That's huge, at this point. What are you seeing so far?
Okay, so like you said, there's a very, very clear renewed push, which is very, very welcome for local manufacturing of pharmaceutical products in Nigeria. And it's very, very important, at this time. I mean, it's good. Sometimes bad events trigger good outcomes. I think after the COVID and then more recently the Forex issues that the country had, this renewed push for local manufacturing of medications gained traction. Now, it's important to understand that it's not just about securing supply chains, for medical products. It's also about securing the health of Nigerians generally. It's also about increasing and developing the industrial base of the country. Because, when you're developing a particular segment, there are also some subsidiary sub-segments that would support those main targeted industries that you're trying to promote. So apart from securing the health of Nigerians, there's also the issue of industrialization and most importantly, creating the required job for Nigerians. If you look at the trend, this push for local manufacturing at some point also gathered momentum like we're seeing now. But you also realize that if you go back to the trend, there was a time there were a lot of policies on prohibiting the import of beta lactams and all that. And manufacturers, pharma manufacturers, invested heavily in beta lactam plants. Now, over a period, within a couple of years, that policy was reversed. So most of the investment in that, in those facilities were like wastes. So the important thing this time is to be consistent, is to ensure that what is seen now as the new push is sustained.
In your opinion, what conditions, do you think we need to encourage, at this point to actually, make us one of the top hubs for pharmaceutical production?
Okay, so what I would like to approach this from the point of view of what are the pains, what are the factors militating against Nigeria having achieved that in the first place. The first one, which is very critical, and I almost talked about it in the intro, is fiscal support, regulatory support, government backing. There has to be a very clear strategy, long-term strategy, not short-term strategy for this to happen. I'll give you an example. Let's take India as a model. India in the 90s passed a law, they called it Indian Patent Law, which clearly encouraged Indian pharma companies to develop their own version of original brands of pharmaceutical products by going through different processes. You know, in patent, you have to state all the steps you took to get to the final products. So the Indian government was very, very vehement in refusing to budge to pressures not to continue with that policy or to continue with that law. And they ran it for almost 20 years. What happened was that it gave the Indian companies the opportunity to develop products, have experience, scaled, and then were ready to face the world. So that gives you an idea of the impact of government policies. And I wouldn't call it just protection, you know, sector protection, but it's not really about protection, but it's really about ensuring some kind of fair play. So that's one. The second one is access to finance. Pharma manufacturing is not just capital intensive. Apart from being capital intensive, it requires patient capital. I'll give you an example. If, Ladi, you have 50 billion naira to invest today, if you take it straight to the stock market, you're going to earn some dividend instantly, right? If you also take it to the banks, put it in fixed deposit, you could earn as much as 15%, right? Instantly. And then if you also decide that you take it even to bond, you know, there are so many other places you can invest your 50 billion. If you invest it in starting off a pharma manufacturing plant, you're going to wait for a minimum of 2 to 3 years before you even start production.
Before production?
Before production, yes. Now, if you have to wait for 2 to 3 years, I'm not sure how many investors with 50 billion would want to go and put it and wait. So that's why we keep talking about having the appropriate funding to encourage the sector, you know, to scale.
Right. So much so, you know, back there, and you know, it seems patient capital is needed right now in so many industries. But it seems for pharma, we need really, really patient capital. You know, from what you said so far. And we've seen the federal government, you know, make some moves. You know, at this time, Nigeria and Brazil signed an MOU to boost, you know, local pharmaceutical, you know, manufacturing, and we see the minister there, Mabe Pate, you know, actually speaking. Let's take a listen quickly now.
Focus on investing in healthcare, but given the state of our economy, that investment clearly will take time before we get the resources that we can provide, like NHS in the UK. So when private actors like you step in, you're really extending your hands, joining to build the health system that we want in this country. So we must appreciate you very deeply.
All right, so we see, you know, partnerships, you know, happening. Yeah, this is, you know, country to country at this point. So, in your view, are you optimistic about these kind of partnerships?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm particularly optimistic. I would say I'll be cautious. The first rule or the first thing I always ask people is there anyone that would love you more than he loves himself? That's the first question. There are partnerships, but you know, when you're going into partnership, each party to the partnership has its own interest, overriding interest, right? But when the interests align, then the outcome will be good. However, the scale of what needs to be done in the pharma segment of Nigeria is not something you're going to rely on another country to push. There really has to be a consistent, wide policy. In fact, let me even come to the issue of assistance, grants, aids, you know, from countries and multilateral agencies. Like I said, when people come to you to help you, they also have at the back of their mind what they stand to be.
They have interest.
Good, they have interest. Right. Now, what I would suggest is that as a country, Nigeria needs to develop a shopping list of what our needs are. In what areas do we have need? Have it articulated, have the shopping list available, and then let any partner or any country that wants to assist plug directly into that arrangement. Now, what it helps us to do is that it will reduce the incidence. And for instance, you heard about Brazil. Recently, there was an initiative from the European Union, and we've seen a whole lot. There are a whole lot going on in the area of training, in the area of helping with WHO pre-qualification. But you find repetition in a lot of these initiatives. So it's important that as a country, we have a bucket of what we need and what will be required of any a country or agency or any entity that wants to assist. What you have today is that you have a whole lot of people playing in a particular area that may not be as impactful as what the other area would have been. So you have too much effort, too many things going on, but in a little space that wouldn't give you much impact. Then you have too little going on in the big area that will give you the big impact. So what I'm suggesting is we have our list of requirements, and then when assistance comes, it has to plug into that list.
Right, so like a blueprint, you know, at this point. But, you know, before we go any further now, definitely there's a business side, you know, to pharmaceutical production, and definitely you did release your Q3 earnings recently, and we see there was a jump there in revenue. There was, you know, about 5 billion in turnover. That's for Q3, you know, 2025. So it seems business is good, you know, at this point, looking at that turnover revenue. Q3, 5 billion, up from 3.09 billion in Q3 2024. That's 62% up year-on-year. Profitability metrics, you see gross profit there, 2.49 billion, up 71% year-on-year. For your bottom line, we've seen net profit, that was up about 9%. Earnings per share, that's at 7 naira 95 kobo. So, you know, on the surface, it looks good. But I'd like to ask you, how's business really?
Well, business is good.
Right.
But it's also tough, right? So I'm saying business is good because we're looking at the future, we're looking at the potential, we're looking at the plans we have and how everything is panning out. But whether it's tough because it's still doing business in Nigeria, right? Good. So
because I remember last year, year before that, it was all about the Forex losses, you know, for the major companies. But I think that's a different picture now.
Yeah, okay.
With stability of the Naira.
Good. So not just the stability of the Naira, but let me just give you a little idea of what we've done. The first thing we did was to try to remove the bottlenecks, supply bottlenecks that we had, you know, in getting products out there in the market. So we carefully looked at what the issues are and tried to remove those supply chain bottlenecks. We also carefully, the key word here is carefully, looked at the portfolio, right? And we asked ourselves, can we do everything at the same time? 30 products, do we have the resources? Do we have, which products are the ones that we're likely going to focus on that has good demand, has good, what's called now, good margins that could now propel the company so that we'll be able to develop the rest, right? So that's the first thing we did. Very importantly, we also curated very clear marketing strategy that targeted the correct segment, and we made sure that we served them well. So that's how we're able to generate the result you've seen. We also were very, very careful in managing our cash flow. We focused on our route to market. You know, our distributor engagement was top-notch, And that's what you've seen the results.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So definitely investors they love to look at most of these earnings to get some kind of foresight on what's going to happen with the company. But in your opinion, do you think companies like you are out of the woods? When it comes to currency fluctuation and inflation, and definitely cost of living crisis. Right now, there's also that talk about some very important medicines, right now that mostly imported, not getting into the country, like blood pressure medication, diabetes. Can we really feed ourselves with these medicines, in your opinion? Can we locally produce them? Because most of them are out of the market now. Most of these companies have left the country. What do you think?
Okay, so let me start from the basic medicines. I can assure you that Nigerian pharma manufacturing companies can take care of our basic medicines. I'll give you recent data. A lot of manufacturing companies in Nigeria today are producing at less than their installed capacity. That's one. Two is that if you look at data even coming from NAFDAC, before now, the ratio of imported products to locally produced products in Nigeria, satisfying Nigeria medical need, was 70% to 30%. So we produce only 30% with 70%. Why? You may ask, even when we have a low utilization of installed capacity. Basically, it's because there's unfair advantage, for products that were produced outside the country. It's not really about protecting a particular sector. It's about ensuring compliance and fair play. I'll give you a little example. An Indian manufacturer today receives incentive for producing. If you look at it really, it's as if you're discounting the products even before the manufacturer ships. And these products will come to Nigeria and compete with that produced by a Nigerian manufacturer that has generated its power, generated its, the water he used to produce, took care of his security, and actually managed most of the infrastructure, right? So it's not really about protection, but about having a kind of level playing ground. So the key thing here is to have a deliberate policy. For instance, we have local content policy in Nigeria, which naturally would mean that for government agencies and organizations and hospitals to purchase medicines, they need to buy more of the locally made products. But how many times has the owners of the policy checked to see what's going on? If that's going on, you remember, your cost of production, apart from what I've just talked about, is also related to the volumes you produce. The higher the volume, the lower your cost per unit. And that's what the Chinese and Indian companies are using to route the...
Because a manufacturer I spoke to here did talk about the cost of power in Nigeria, compared to the cost of power in China.
Yeah.
Nigeria is 2x.
Okay, yeah.
That cost, and many other costs that you also mentioned.
Yeah.
So I guess the big question is, how do we bring down all of this cost to allow the Nigerian manufacturer compete?
Okay, so there are things that have been done elsewhere. You remember, nothing is entirely new on planet anymore. If you have a challenge, all you need to do is to look at who else has had that challenge before, and then see what the person did and see how you can adapt his own solutions. Let's look at India. I just talked about their patent laws and all that. When they did that, they didn't stop there. They had a series of initiatives. The next initiative they took, because they were having the same challenge we are currently having, is to set up pharma manufacturing parks, right? Which were areas dedicated to pharma manufacturing. So the common facilities that are needed for manufacturing pharmaceutical products were provided. So when you have, when you share your cost you now find out that suddenly what was big will now become a very little fraction of what it used to be. So when you have 10 pharma companies in the same location, sharing security costs, sharing energy costs, sharing all those kind of heavy costs, the cost of production comes down. So I'm referring to that model that has already been done. What we have also seen in Nigeria is that that initiative is coming up, but it's coming up in a very splintered manner. Every state, or well, a lot of states in Nigeria are now talking about pharma manufacturing parks. At the last count, I've counted 5. Now, that is again doing too little to solve a big problem. There should be a national policy on this. There should be a national coordination, because the resources available at the state level is not the same as what it is at the federal level. And if resources are pulled together, you have much more impact, right? So that should be coordinated at the national level, because you also see that the governor that initiated this industrial park initiative, when he leaves the office, his predecessor may not really be interested. So what then happens? Then the companies, the pharma companies that have signed on to these parks will be left out in the cold. So that's so
I guess we'll have to make it law.
Yes.
At this point. So even if another administration comes in, they have to follow.
Oh yeah.
That blueprint.
Yes.
All right. Definitely.
That's why I also talked about national. Making it a national policy. Yeah.
Right. All right. So at this point, we also when we look at the urban side of things, we should also worry about the rural parts. And when we're seeing high costs of medicines, the urban parts, I can imagine how high it would be, or even if it's available, in the rural sides. What conversations are you having about that?
Okay, yeah. So basically, let me also say that it's not really about giving the rural parts preferential treatment. Our focus is in ensuring that our products are available everywhere they are needed. So what we do is to track demand, right, and follow the demand for the product, arrange our supply chain in such a manner that wherever these products are needed, they are available. And we've gone into supply distribution agreements with 2-3 big pharma distribution companies, and they are doing very well in that respect. The key thing that we keep talking about is how to scale up. How do we have the opportunity of ensuring that we have enough resources to even do more, not just tracking demand? Because the population is increasing. We have a very massive population in Nigeria. The demand is rising, the lifestyle is changing, and as the lifestyle is changing, the incidence of chronic diseases like diabetes, hypertension would also increase, right? So that means as we go forward, both in the rural and in the urban centers, you're going to have surge in demand of pharma products. What strategy, what policies, what initiatives do we have in place, both from the government, from the investing public, the pharma companies themselves, to ensure that we take care of this need? There's something I want to also talk about. We have a huge opportunity in Nigeria as pharma manufacturers, as a country, that we're not thinking about. Studies and publications on going global, because it's not, we're just talking about satisfying local need now. That's not the key, the big thing. The big thing is in the pharma companies in Nigeria being able to go regional, being able to go global, right? Because when you're satisfying your local market, you tend to sharpen up your experience, your expertise, and then be able to put yourself in a position to go regional, go global, right? That is where we are supposed to be thinking about. And the advantage Nigeria has is that with our population, we have enough market to do all those. Research and publications have shown that companies that do well globally, first of all, do well locally. You don't have American companies. You won't have an American company that started in Nigeria and is doing very well and then is going back to the US. That puts Nigeria in a special place. There are few African countries that have that opportunity. As I speak to you, you will see the development of manufacturing plants around Nigeria, but not in Nigeria. You know why? They're all targeting Nigeria's huge market because of AFTA.
But you don't want to produce in Nigeria.
Yes. And I'm sure you know the reason. The cost of producing in Nigeria is far higher because of the infrastructural deficit we all know about. You know, but the Nigerian manufacturers are Nigerians. We're not going to start running to Ghana or to Benin Republic to go and start producing. We stay patriotic, we bear the cost, but it comes at a huge cost also, and it costs us when it comes to competition.
Yeah. All right, I'll say thank you to you, manufacturers that stay and battle it out and produce in Nigeria and still, cater to this market. Yeah. Thank you so much. It was great having this conversation with you, sir. Yeah. Mr. Valentine Okelu, who's the MD CEO, Neimeth International PLC. Thank you for coming on the show today, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break now.